So thank you all for joining today. My name is Nicholas. I'm a member of the marketing team with Fire-Dex. So we've been partners with this team at the Illinois Fire Safety Institute for a number of years now. They've been really good partners with us. So we invited them to share some of the research that they've been involved with heat stress. So I will let them handle it from here. They're definitely much more interesting than I am. So I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself, Maddie and Tim.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for making the time for this webinar. My name is Maddie Zamaki. I'm a PhD student in the Department of Health and Kinesiology at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. And the last 3 years, I've also spent my time in the Illinois Fire Service Institute research labs as a graduate researcher. And then I also manage or direct the physical training program for the State Fire Academy.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Tim Walsh. I'm the Director of Corporate Relations for the Illinois Fire Service Institute, which means I get to work with vendors who are like-minded, like firefighters who want to make the job better. I've been in the fire service 45 years, served as the Chief of Special Operations for the Chicago Fire Department before I retired. And I'm happy to be here today, and I'm here to translate for Maddie because she's way smarter than I am. I only have 6 years of college. Maddie has far more credentials than I do.
All right, well, thank you both. And then just some housekeeping. We will be taking questions throughout, and then at the end of the session, we'll be asking those for you all. So, well, Maddie, I'll let you take it away.
Sure. All right. So today our focus is on heat stress and obviously how this impacts any sort of firefighting activities. But we're going to just start off with a graphic as well as just kind of the definition of what heat stress is. So we understand heat stress to be when your body is unable to release heat through the skin or dissipate sweat. Therefore, what happens is that the core body temperature, not the temperature of your skin, but the core body temperature within your body, it begins to rise, and comes a point of no return where it's very difficult to control over time. This graphic here over on the left-hand side, we see an individual who's supposed to be kind of a regular exerciser who is not confined to gear, and we kind of see the breakdown of how the heat that the individual releases from their body is kind of brought back out to the world or into the environment. And this plays a great role in thermal regulation. So we look at evaporation, convection and conduction, as well as radiation. Where on the flip side for firefighters, due to your gear, as well as just the radiant heat that you're feeling from the fire, you lack skin exposure. So for that sweat that's pooling at the top of the surface of the skin, it can't really be released or brought back into the environment. So there's little evaporation, as well as convection and conduction ways of reducing heat. That's also diminished, and also radiation. So this is just a very general graphic from one of the great exercise physiology researchers for firefighters, Dr. Denise Smith. I really hope that anyone who knows her name is able to keep this conversation going with heat stress, because she's done some really pivotal research, which I'll be kind of covering throughout this presentation. All right. So what do we know about the problem of heat stress? The main issue, we're kind of still facing it today, is that any adverse cardiovascular event remains the leading cause of death among firefighter fatalities. And just so we are kind of all speaking the same language, our definition of firefighter fatalities is whether a firefighter dies on the line of duty or within 24 hours after they were on shift. But this is a great report that comes out every year. It's called Fatal Firefighter Injuries in the U.S., and it's by the same authors as usual, Richard Campbell and Jay Petrillo. So this report was just published in 2025 or in June 2025, but it's on 2024. And kind of the key takeaway I want you to take from the image on the right-hand side, so table C, is we can see sudden cardiac death, aneurysms or embolism, and heat stroke. All of these have to do with blood flow issues. So I would almost say that putting them all together, this makes up, I think I looked at it, it was around 57% rather than a lower number of all injuries in firefighter fatalities. Continuing on, the report, again, it has a lot of great information in there, but I grabbed a couple other graphs from it. And what we see is that over time, there is a decrease in firefighter deaths overall, and that's always a great start. However, what we find is that those related to overexertion or strain still remain steady. So here, our figure 6 on the right, upper right-hand corner, we see our overexertion or strain related deaths still is 57%, our leading cause of death. And then in figure 4 on the right hand side, we see the point that I want to bring up here is that there are obviously the main amount of fireground injuries is 32%. However, what's following right behind there is training injuries. So 18% of firefighter fatalities are due to times when they're training. And what I would, my main message here, I guess, throughout the webinar is going to be that we can reduce that significantly if we make sure that we pay attention to our rehab, as well as some other behaviors that we can start today instead of potentially seeing that happen on the back end. So I'm going to go into a little bit of the science about how the body heats up. I love making sure that everyone's on the same page, and it's always great to share this information. So I kind of broke it down into what is our input and then what is our output, or what's happening after that. So the input is going to be our metabolic heat as well as the environmental heat. And the metabolic heat is when you're completing any firefighting task. And it's pretty much all the energy that's needed for your muscles to contract. So any sort of muscular activity, it's going to start creating metabolic heat within your body. On top of that, because you're a firefighter, you also have environmental heat. So you might have the heat of just what's going on outside. So maybe it's a 90-degree day. And then on top of that, you're walking into a fire that could be maybe upwards of 1100 degrees. So what happens here is once you add all that heat together, your brain sends a response to begin conditioning your body. And one of the first steps to do that is your body wants to start vasodilating those blood vessels. And you see on the upper right-hand corner image of a normal blood vessel, and that's usually what it's at when maybe your heart rate is at resting heart rate. And then you see what happens when it dilates. And the reason why your body is doing it is because it's trying to increase the transportation of oxygen, nutrients, and glucose. And you'll see in a couple images below why that glucose is actually really important when you rehydrate with electrolytes. The other purpose is also to decrease blood pressure and remove any cellular waste production. So a lot of us think of this as like lactic acid buildup in our body. And this is when your body has a lot of carbon dioxide and just waste. And that's why we start to get those cramps maybe in our calves or in our thighs or in our abdomen, is because of that buildup over time. So then our output, once we kind of, our blood vessels vasodilate, and so the purpose is to hopefully bring more blood throughout your body and then have more blood being reoxygenated. The hypothalamus, which is a part of your brain, it sends a signal to the body to vasodilate those blood vessels. At that point, you now have more blood that's being rushed to the surface of your skin. And this is all good things. To think that it's not a good thing, that's wrong. This is all the appropriate responses your body should be taking. But at this point, once the blood vessel vasodilates, the sweat glands will secrete water and ions, or our electrolytes, to remove heat from the most superficial surface of the body, which is the skin. Again, this is all normal, and this is exactly how things should be going. Now, if you look at the middle picture on the right-hand side of the slide, this is kind of where we get into a little bit of trouble with firefighting. So we see that a regular exerciser, again, if we compare it to a regular individual versus someone who is going into a lot of heat, like a firefighter, there's just everything is to the extreme. So the amount of liquid or water that you're losing in your body is maybe 2 to 3 times more in the fireground. There's a higher exertion level, potentially higher stress in this event. You're in extreme heat, and there's just heavy clothing that might also not help remove this sweat from your body. And so what happens is that in that 1 liter of sweat that you're losing, you're also losing all those ions. So what you try to do when you replenish with water or with electrolytes is have some form of electrolyte drink that also has some sugars in there. And the reason why you want that sugar, as we can see in the picture on the right-hand corner, is because that sugar helps get the sodium ion, or what those electrolytes that you need, back into the cell. And then you're truly rehydrating yourself. So again, just to kind of break it down, when your body starts to overheat, their first response is your blood vessels are going to start to vasodilate, which is going to bring more heat to the surface of the body. And then it's going to slowly dissipate or produce sweat, or produce the heat in the form of sweat. And then the sweat is going to try to remove itself from your body. All right. And I love to share this image, though, across the heat stress continuum, because to think that heat stress is not, or you're never going to be impacted by heat stress, is also incorrect. There's a myriad of conditions, from something that's mild to moderate to very progressive, where it's going to become severe and potentially cause a lot of damage. But in any aspect of your life, you're going to experience heat stress, and it doesn't just occur to firefighters. So some of the reasons might be due to blood volume shifts, restrictive gear for sweat dissipation, and also electrolyte imbalance. So we kind of covered 2 of those in just the past slide, and how the blood volume is now moving to the surface of the skin, or as close to the surface of the skin as possible. And when this happens, you have a lot of blood that's now not in the central location of your body. So all of the central organs you have, including your heart. So this is where we start to experience potentially cardiac strain. And this is because the central blood volume has now reduced. And so your body is working on less blood, essentially. You have the same amount of blood in your body. However, it's now removed from those main organs that you need to continue operating. But heat rash. So I have a feeling everyone's experienced heat rash. I for sure have, just going on a run. And if it's a super humid day, and if I'm not able to get the sweat off my body as soon as possible, I'll for sure start getting an itchy skin and see those red bumps on my arms. Heat cramps is kind of the step up. And this is where you start to see issues due to the electrolyte imbalance. So this is when certain ions that are super key to keeping those muscles contracting, or keep that muscular activity going on, it doesn't have enough of those ions or electrolytes to work as efficiently. So this is where you might experience involuntary muscle cramps of the arms, legs, or abdomen, which I have a feeling many of you might have also experienced before, whether it was during firefighting activities or maybe also just during regular exercise. Here you still have heavy sweating, which is okay, but it's something to start moderating for yourself or monitoring for yourself. And you might have normal to slightly elevated core body temperatures. So here we're still okay, but you need to be a little bit more conscientious of what's going on. And then we kind of move to the stage of heat exhaustion. And this is going to be kind of our orange zone, if you will. This is where you're starting to experience certain symptoms that will weaken your ability to really perform your job as well. So these might include profuse sweating, so where the skin is moist and cool. And this is kind of a point where what you're hydrating yourself with, whether it's electrolytes or just regular water, your body might not be able to start catching up to what you need. You might also experience fatigue, dizziness, and weakness, nausea or vomiting, throbbing headache. Cold and clammy skin is a really big giveaway. And this is when your normal to slightly elevated core body temperature is kind of increasing past just those regular heat cramps. And then finally, you've kind of definitely hit the red zone if you start experiencing the symptoms of a heat stroke. This is when you can identify this with an individual who might have an altered mental state. They might be confused. They might not respond to questions appropriately or at the right amount of time. You'll notice that they have a strong, rapid pulse, whereas in heat exhaustion, the pulse might be weak. And it's because the heart is trying to compensate for pretty much not having the appropriate resources for it to do its job as efficiently as it should be doing. Again, that throbbing headache might persist. In a heat stroke, an individual is more likely to be vomiting. And at this point, they have a high uncontrolled core body temperature. And so the point of no return is between that heat exhaustion and heat stroke, but really any rehabilitation procedures or protocols that you have for your fire department should start at the kind of once you hit heat cramps and you're heading into heat exhaustion. So if you can identify any of these symptoms in another individual, because it's kind of more difficult the further you go along this continuum to identify them in yourselves, it's best that you call it out and you provide them with the right resources, which we'll go over a little bit later in the presentation. Awesome. So again, a little bit more on the science behind what's going on with the heart. Um, we always seek normal blood flow, right? But just so we're all on the same page again, what usually happens is you have the superior vena cava and then inferior vena cava. And it's where the blood that's now deoxygenated, it's returning back to the heart to be reoxygenated. So it pulls back down onto the right atria, which is on the upper hand side right here. And then it's going to go ahead and sink down into the right ventricle. The right ventricle is then going to be pushing the deoxygenated blood back to your lungs. So then the lungs are going to reoxygenate that blood and send it now to the left atria, which is in the red now. So that's the reoxygenated blood, and then down to the left ventricle, which will then pump the new reoxygenated blood to the aorta. Now, some things that might be happening following any sort of firefighting activities, and you'll see in the references section a lot of these studies that I'm referring to, but past research has found an increase in platelet number, fibrin production, leukocyte count, thrombus formation, impaired vascular vasomotor function, and then increased plasma levels of cortisol and ACTH. So the main takeaway here is that firefighting activities may result in vascular, hormonal, and immunological impairments. But again, these are all appropriate things that your body is doing. The question is just, is it doing it for the correct amount of time? And are you giving yourself that time to rehab and recover as best as you can? So that's what should be happening on the left-hand side. Oh, do you mind going back real quick? Thank you. And then when there's compromised blood flow, two things that might be causing the compromised blood flow is something called left ventricular hypertrophy. So for our gym folks, we do know that hypertrophy is good. You know, we want our muscles to become more hypertrophic. That means that you're building muscle. But regarding the heart, a lot of the times, if that left ventricle, which is the main guy that's pushing the blood volume out to the rest of the body, if that becomes too thick or if it becomes too muscular, it's a sign that it's been overextending itself for too long. So this is usually a condition that follows over a long period of time. This isn't something that happens acutely or just, you know, after one incident, then you suddenly have this this diagnosis, if you will. But this is something that's due to kind of being ill-prepared or being put in extreme situations time and time again throughout your career. And then the image below is showing atherosclerosis, and it's pretty much plaque buildup. So waste or things that we don't want in our body, it begins to build up, and then it can create a blood clot, which can maybe move about the system. So that was like our pulmonary embolism or an aneurysm. That's when a blood clot is removed, and then it starts moving throughout the blood system or the blood vessel. But over time, things that can remove this atherosclerosis is going to be continuous exercise and appropriate nutrition. And again, I'm sure we've all heard these things before, but they're all equally necessary. And I hope that I'm going to continue covering this throughout the webinar as to why it's so necessary and what we can do to mitigate these larger issues. So then on the flip side, not just kind of the structure of the heart, but then we also have the physiology of the heart. Something that's super cool about it is that it has its own electrical conduction system. So this is separate from the rest of the body. And just to break it down, we have this sinoatrial node right here on the right-hand side, or the left-hand side of the picture, but it's on the right-hand side of the heart. And it sends a signal to the rest of the heart and kind of in the middle portion right here. And ultimately what it's doing is it's sending that electrical signal to contract the heart. And that's kind of how you get your heart rate, and that's how you send the blood throughout the rest of the body. One other main issue that we see in firefighters is experiencing abnormal electrical conduction of the heart, and this is considered an arrhythmia. One very familiar one that you might be aware of is an atrial fibrillation. And this is pretty much where the atria, usually on the left-hand side, it could be both, but on the left-hand side, it's trying pretty much to do its job, but it's overworked and it's trying to push as much blood as possible. And now you can see from the normal heart rate, which is the appropriate amount of time in between each bout, now it's kind of very much off, and it's not really following any sort of pattern anymore. And this can also be something that firefighters incur due to pretty much the blood volume is changing within the body, and it's trying to respond as best as possible to keep everything going at the right speed. Awesome. So I will tell you a little bit more about the long-term benefits of improved cardiorespiratory fitness. This was another figure from Dr. Smith in a paper that she had written, and this kind of breaks down what might be going on, or those physiological responses during firefighting. So cardiovascular strain, heat stress, dehydration, which is going to make the blood thicker, which is going to provide, or there's going to be more cardiovascular strain on the heart due to dehydration, as well as fatigue throughout the whole body. But the question is why would we be exercising ahead of time, if you will, or why is it so key to being a chronic exerciser, if you will, in order to appropriately manage different firefighting challenges? And some of these reasons is because it increases the cardiovascular capacity and it decreases risk of clot formation. So the more we exercise and the more we conduct aerobic exercise, the better our heart is going to respond to other stressful stimuli. We also have improved thermoregulation and tolerance for higher temperature. So this is called climate or heat acclimation. And essentially your body is becoming more acclimated to being in higher heat over time. And this happens to us every single summer, when we go from spring and then the summer months, and, we're used to maybe 60, 70 degrees, and suddenly we have our first 90-degree day. At first, it's kind of a shock to us. But then over time throughout the summer, we're now used to that heat, and then our body responds a lot better. It also increases plasma volume. So the more we exercise, the greater amount of plasma volume. And what plasma has in it is a lot of those nutrients, as well as plasma is essentially water in the cell. So if we can increase the water in the cell, then it's going to pretty much reduce dehydration, or we're going to have more time firefighting before our body experiences dehydration. And then finally, we can increase the strength and endurance as well as decrease fatigue. So this is talking about muscular strength and endurance. And the more we exercise, the more we move our muscles, the better conditioned we're going to be and have less fatigue in our bodies. And then on the images on the right-hand side, we have another researcher. His name is Steve Blair, and he did a lot of public health research. And some of the big things that he found is that low cardiorespiratory fitness is the leading cause of death in males and females. So around 16% of the cause of deaths can be attributed to low cardiorespiratory fitness. And then we also find on the lower right-hand corner that low cardiorespiratory fitness across all BMI groups poses the greatest risk of cardiovascular disease mortality. And what this is trying to say, and it's quite alarming news, but it's saying that it doesn't matter if your BMI, if your BMI is underweight, so 18.5 all the way up to 35. They found that those who had better cardiorespiratory fitness had a lower risk of cardiovascular disease mortality. And that was kind of information that was surprising to the research or scientific community, because you would have expected that individuals who have a higher BMI will also experience higher risks of cardiovascular disease. But in truth, it has to do with your aerobic fitness as much as possible. All right, so just to kind of summarize what we've talked about so far, it's about the impacts of heat stress, what's going on in the body again. But we see that heart rate, blood pressure, and respiration rate increase in response to this physical exertion and are exacerbated by heat stress. So it's really the extra push there that makes it more difficult. But then on the flip side, we see that cardiac output, stroke volume, and the central blood volume and plasma volume decrease during this time. So that's kind of what's going on in the body during heat stress. Now, what's really interesting is that those coagulatory factors, so fibrin as well as platelet formation, which is pretty much considered like an open wound, and those who maybe recover better from an open wound have greater platelet formation, and that happens quicker for them. But during events like this, I just find it so fascinating that in a heat stress environment, our body responds as if we're going to be physically injured or we're going to have some sort of open wound. And it's just kind of one of the wonders of the body, and how does it know that that might happen? So the ways that it prepares for that is it increases our coagulatory factors, and it also increases viscosity in the blood. And this is because, again, it's a matter of hydration or electrolyte imbalance, and that water is being removed from the cell, and because you're sweating it out, because you're trying to reduce your heat. And so those are kind of just the mechanisms that are at play during heat stress. And then what are our long-term heat exposure, whether it's the benefits or the consequences? So again, the repeated exposure builds acclimation or acclimatization of the body. So what happens during this period? It might lower heart rate during any sort of work you might be completing. It increases your plasma volume, which is good because it also increases your cooling capacity or decreases hydration or dehydration, sorry. It reduces afterload on the heart. You sweat more, which might sound like an inverse thing. It might not sound right. But again, this is our first mechanism. This is our first line of defense that our body takes to reduce heat stress in the body. There will be better electrolyte conservation. So over time, our body shifts and it starts to notice what's important and what things it wants to keep for a longer period of time versus what it's willing to take away, even if it doesn't know when the next instead of maybe hydration or electrolytes are going to hit your system again. It improves the tolerance to extreme environments. So just over time, your body is more used to it. And so it kind of just goes into a more autopilot version of yourself. And it improved core temperature response to work, which means that your core temperature is increasing at a slower rate, which is what we're looking for. Is we want our body to respond appropriately, but we want it to not freak out and say like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never seen this before. And so it increases your core temperature slower. And then we also see a faster recovery in the rehab period, which I'll talk about in a little bit. On the flip side, we also do have some negative portions of this, and this is really just focused on heat stroke. So if we go back to that slide about heat stress across the continuum, we saw the differences between the heat cramps, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. And there begins to be a point of no return. And once someone is injured, whether it's a firefighter or any individual, and has like an actual confirmed case that they did experience heat stroke, it makes additional heat stroke events more likely. So this might potentially damage brain, liver, kidney, and heart function. And meds such as beta blockers also might increase your likelihood of experiencing heat stroke. As well as if you have comorbidities or health conditions such as diabetes, heart and lung diseases. All right, we're going to move forward to kind of cooling and what we can do with that. Okay, so we talked about how the body heats up at the beginning of the webinar, and now we're going to start to dial it back a little bit and talk about how the body cools down. So again, the blood vessels vasodilate, and that energy, remember the metabolic energy from muscular activity, as well as the environmental energy. So whether that was the thermal energy from just what it was outside, as well as the fire and what that heat produced, that is now transferred to sweating. And then in best case scenarios, it evaporates from the skin's surface. So steps that we can take to improve our cooling efforts is going to be removing our SCBA. Anytime that we have extra weight, we're just putting more effort on our body. So if you can reduce weight just in general or that extra load, whether it's the SCBA or if you're holding equipment in your hands, if you have the ability to let it go, please do that. And then also, if you can also unzip or take off your jacket and pants, that's going to be your first step to allowing your skin to have some sort of airflow back once your gear is removed. You're going to begin your hydration regimen as soon as possible, which is going to be that electrolyte refuel. And we talked about a little bit how it's important to have some of those sugars in your electrolyte drink because it's going to help bring those electrolytes back into the cell sooner. Using portable fans, and those with a mister, that's also a plus because then you're getting cool water, believe it or not, on your skin, as well as that ventilation process is increasing to help ventilate the skin. And also, if you have long training days or you know that you guys are training, prepare as much as you can, which might include grabbing like some sort of bucket that you might have or a Home Depot bucket, fill it up with ice water mix. And one thing that the military takes a lot of credit for this one is that they've found that if you're just in a t-shirt or even a long sleeve t-shirt and you've dropped your pants and jacket, go ahead and put your arms and forearms into an ice water bath. And this helps reduce your heat quite quickly. And our key to successful cooling is number one, you have to know your own sweating rate. And the way that you know this is if you exercise more or if you exercise regularly, and if you have an opportunity to get more training in and live fire training. So once you can start to recognize your sweating rate, then you're going to know how to better prepare yourself. And the main key here is also to be a step ahead of heat exhaustion. Having a designated rehab tent or vehicle with all necessary refueling and cooling tools you have access to is absolutely key. So again, if you have a training day that you know that you're headed to, then just make sure, do yourself the courtesy of taking care of yourself before an incident might occur. But I do understand that things might be different if you're just responding to an incident. But that's what we train for, right? We train for the things that we don't know might be coming up in the future. So one of the, I guess, most recent NFPA guidelines, is 1584. And this was originally established in 1987, or that's when they started talking about it, but it wasn't an official guideline. And then now we currently have the 2015 edition. And this is the standard on rehabilitation process for members during emergency operations and training exercises. And so some of the key takeaways from this guideline is proper rehab is essential for limiting the risk of heat stress, and what they recommend is after 2 bottles on the SCBA or 40 minutes of work. So if you're performing overhaul without being on your SCBA, this necessitates rehab procedures to go ahead and be activated. And it's really key that you understand that putting a firefighter back on duty too soon increases the risk of cardiovascular events, and it reduces their work efficiency if you put them out there too early. So if you have the time, if you have the freedom and the space to maybe give another 10 minutes to your job, then go ahead and do that. It's not gonna, it might not impact other people, but it could impact your own firefighter. So the rehab, what it looks like is they expect a 10 to 20 minute rest period. Again, after those 2 bottles on the SCBA or 40 minutes of work. And what they would like to see is if your heart rate goes down to less than 100 beats per minute, or if you also have access to look at your blood pressure, maybe an automatic cuff to be 160 over 100. Also, if you have access to a quick, SpO2 monitor that you can just put on your finger really quickly. And if it's greater than 95%, then they say that you're good to go and you can head back out. As well as if someone doesn't present any symptoms of heat stress or more than normal fatigue. So if this individual, maybe all those things, if they check the box for the first 4 items, but maybe they're having some cognitive issues or they're not responding to questions appropriately or speaking a little funny, that would be a sign that you might have that individual heading from heat exhaustion to heat stroke. And therefore, you're not going to continue their firefighting efforts, and you're going to provide more rehab for them or potentially medical attention. I'm going to hand it over now to Tim Walsh, who's going to share more about the role of gear in heat stress.
Hey, welcome everybody. I've answered a few questions in the chat, so if you have more, please continue. Maddie's hit some really great points about preparation for your day at the firehouse, which is a little difficult if you're paid on call or a volunteer, but hydrating before you come in, making sure you don't do what I did for the majority of my career, which was an extra large Dunkin' Donuts black coffee on the way in and then more coffee when I arrived at the firehouse. I participated in a good deal of the studies that were done on the IFSI campus as it relates to hydration as a research participant, otherwise known in the fire service as a guinea pig. So Maddie's really good points about your blood becoming more viscous, thicker as you dehydrate is key to your survival in your career, both as a volunteer, paid on call, and paid professional, your whole time on the job. And performing some type of workout on a daily basis, even if a half hour as a company officer with your crew, and even as a chief officer, to make sure that you're used to working in the gear and providing some heat assimilation even in the gear is beneficial for you in your career. What we like about Fire-Dex, and what I like about Fire-Dex as an end user, is they're into all the science, and their production manager, Sean, was actually on our campus just in the last few weeks, wearing what he produces and testing it in fire buildings to make sure that he is hitting all the points that Fire-Dex likes to talk about, which is TPP and THL. So THL stands for thermal protective performance, and that's the overall protective heat related performance of the gear. But I think what the most important part is the ability of the gear to actually resist evaporative heat transfer. So Fire-Dex gear, the Aeroflex that our RIT instructors wear, and our RIT instructors go to about 8 working fires a day over 5 days. So 40 fires in a 5-day period, high heat. Hose is not utilized usually in those evolutions because we're teaching firefighters how to rescue other firefighters. So this is one of the reasons that we partnered with Fire-Dex, was because our instructors felt more comfortable in the gear. They were less fatigued. They were able to cool off faster. There's a noticeable difference in how the gear operates on the fire ground. So you're going to say to me, hey, Tim, we only go to 1 fire a month. That doesn't matter. It all, as Maddie talked about, piles up within your career. And each time that you're exposed to high heat while you're wearing your PPE, while working in it, if it's restrictive, if it doesn't allow heat to escape, if it confines you in any way while you're working on the fire ground, this will all have an impact in not only your musculoskeletal system on the fire ground, but your cardiorespiratory system. And it's all tied together. So the issue that Fire-Dex brings to the forefront is they're in for a penny, in for a pound. They actually back up what they say. Their people that produce the gear actually wear it. And they have many ambassador accounts with instructors all over the country who would say the same thing that I'm saying to you now. Reach out to an instructional organization near where you live and speak to them and ask them if they wear Fire-Dex, why it's so beneficial for them to wear it. And they're going to hit the same points that I'm hitting here today. The science behind all this is key, and sometimes it can be a little overwhelming. Maddie did a great job of tying it into what we do on a daily basis and how it affects you. But like I said, on your way in the morning to the firehouse, if you're hitting Bang energy drink and Rockstar and then coffee and up, and you're not following that up with hydration after each liquid that you ingest, it's probably going to be a very long day for you. And our brothers and sisters that work on the West Coast and the southern parts of the United States and overseas and hotter climates see this on a daily basis. And if you really make an effort to assimilate working in that heat, in that gear, you'll see increased benefits on the fire ground. So I think what we'll do now is if anybody has any questions, whether you want to speak audibly or just type them into the question and answer, Maddie and I would be happy to answer any questions that you have. There's representatives from Fire-Dex online as well, too, if you have a specific question for Fire-Dex. Otherwise, thank you, and we appreciate you participating. This is stuff that can be used in daily trainings and monthly trainings and weekly trainings, and it's a great topic. I preach what I say. I still work out. I had a Bruce test yesterday, and I passed it for a 61-year-old fat guy, and that's because I actually still continue to do some cardiorespiratory work. So you guys stay safe out there, and if you have any questions for us, we'll be talking to you now.
One person had a question about overcooling on the fire.
Yeah, I think sometimes when we do rehab, which is critical at a fire scene, dependent on environmental conditions and actually just working in the gear, as Maddie stated, as it relates to the NFPA requirement, that ice is used sparingly. We just want to submerge, as Maddie talked about, the forearms, which provides cooling to the peripheral blood. And then if you actually, I know this is going to sound stupid, but if you're a firefighter, it's pretty easy. If you raise your arms above your heads after you provide that peripheral cooling, that cold blood returns to the core of your heart and your cardiovascular system and reduces that heat stress that your body was under. So sometimes if NFPA standards are not monitored by EMTs and paramedics to make sure that we're doing a good job, and part of that is taking a temperature of the member that's in rehab as well. And you can do that, orally, or you can do it with just a touch temperature monitor. Then you overcool the person, and that could become an issue. And I'm looking at Ryan's question here right now. Hold on 1 minute, Ryan. So if you give up some of the thermal heat protection on the exterior of the PPE, and you're not flowing water as you attack the fire, which is been researched and put out there for a long time now, then you could possibly burn yourself exteriorly, right? Because the fire's hot. We all know that. I'm not oversimplifying what you guys already know. So I think there's a great balance, and the actually exterior protection of the gear and the interior protection of the gear. So that's why a trial test with Fire-Dex, I think, is important. They have rental gear available. You should, if you're purchasing new gear, you should create a committee of people that are interested in looking at it, and you should actually wear it. Wear it on training night, preferably wear it to a fire if you can run it for a short period of time, and see how the PPE performs overall. I think that you'll see a marked increase in your ability to operate on the fire ground if the PPE that you're using has some evaporative cooling from the inside. I know that when I first started, I was wearing hip boots and a 3/4 coat, and the 3/4 coat was made out of rubber. So there was no evaporative cooling. And in the summertime in Chicago, it would not be uncommon to see 8 or 10 members laid out on the front lawn after a pretty good fire, because they were just so overcome by heat internally, not externally, if that makes sense. It's sense to you. Ryan, did I answer that question for everybody? Well, I think with Nick's permission, we'll probably go ahead and close it out. Like I said before, do the due diligence. Research what you wear, research what you use. One of the benefits of working here at the Illinois Fire Service Institute is that our training grounds, our 29 acres, is right behind our research facility with top level PhDs like Maddie. So we do real research with real firefighters in real situations. And I think it's important to the fire service as we move forward to continue that. There's a lot of people out there that'll tell you what they know, but they don't back it up by research. Here at the Illinois Fire Service Institute, the people that we partner with, like Fire-Dex, we back it up with research. And Jaleel, I don't think there's any issue with sharing my email or Maddie's email. I'll type mine in right now for you. Any other questions?
All right, and then just some housekeeping. This presentation has been recorded, and we'll be sending that out to you all. And thank you, Tim and Maddie. We really appreciate your time here. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. And then if you have continuing questions, I believe Maddie and Tim just put their contact information in the chat there. But otherwise, you can also email our marketing team here as well. So thank you both very much. I think we'll
Why don't you type your marketing email information in for him, please, Nick, and then you can sign off, buddy. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Maddie. Nice job, Maddie.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Okay.